always like, oh, but Israel is surrounded on all sides by enemies. And it's like, do you know who else was surrounded on all sides by enemies? These guys. Yeah, it turns out when your state is founded by genocidal ethno-nationalists stealing land that isn't theirs, your neighbors tend to not like you very much. Shocking. Like, Zionists always try to frame the central conflict in the Middle East as, oh, these Arab states refuse to recognize Israel's right to exist, which is, like, technically accurate, just like it's technically accurate to frame the central conflict of World War II as the Allied nations refused to recognize the Third Reich's right to exist. In both cases, for very good reason, because both the Third Reich and Israel were founded by genocidal ethno-nationalists stealing land that wasn't theirs because they felt they had an ancestral historical claim to it. Oh, but the Arab states are the ones that declared war on Israel, so technically they started the conflict. France and the UK are the ones that declared war on Germany, so by your logic, Hitler is the victim. Which is logic that only makes sense if you frame violently stealing people's land as a neutral action that everyone else should be fine with. Ah, but the Levant used to be part of the Kingdom of Israel, and Czechoslovakia used to be part of the Holy Roman Empire. I guess that gives Hitler a free pass.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up, a concise show dedicated to bringing you the most relevant, independent news as we see it from the last 24 hours. Monday, May 6, 2024. Thank you for joining me today. Likely going to be the very last time you see me in this setting. It may be very similar, but this is the last time you'll probably see me here. If you're on the YouTube stream, why? Just actually mean that. But in general, if you're on the YouTube stream, it's probably just about to get started. I forgot to change over the thread, so it'll be starting for you right now. Now, I've got very limited time today, and genuinely not whether I end up trying to go long or not. I literally have about an hour and a half, if not less, for multiple reasons. So we'll see if we get to everything that I have lined up today, what I have in the title. In general, we're going to make sure we cover, but there's quite a lot to talk about. As always, but important developments in regard to obviously the ceasefire conversation, the illusion therein, the Rafah invasion, the beginning of it, or at least the statement therein. There's a lot to talk about around developments around the Israeli perspective of these conversations. As I keep trying to show people, really powerful statements coming from writers from 972 magazine showing you people on the ground saying, if Israel does not accept Hamas's deal, Israel will burn. These are Israeli Jews protesting Israel's government, and yet we're being called racist in the United States for highlighting that Israel should be accepting the deal as opposed to continuing their genocidal efforts in Gaza that's threatening the lives of the hostages that they claim they're trying to rescue. It's ridiculous, and it has been from the very beginning, regardless of whether you think they're right or wrong in regard to what's going on in the general sense. What's happening here is obviously counter to everybody's interest other than the Israeli government, at the expense of both the Gaza people, Palestinians, and the Israelis, which is just fascinating to see how this has developed. Now, we're going to talk about how that's gone forward, how it seems the Rafah discussion, as I was already feeling, we talked about, is sort of being used as this counterbalance to push back against any deal that goes against their interest, which is any deal at all, it seems, which is frustrating everybody, including the Israeli population. We're also going to get into some conversation around, which one was it here? Oh, as well as, actually, I'm going to go ahead and pause there for obvious reasons for time, but we wanted to talk a bit about the bombing and the Kareem Shalom discussion around the illusion Israel's framing this clear attack of a military buildup in regard to Rafah as some sort of Hamas targeting of aid, while they're lying yet again about the delivering of aid that both UNRWA as well as the United Nations and specific rapporteurs have openly, publicly proven and called out just in the last week about how they're withholding aid, stopping aid from getting through. The same thing that's been going on the entire time. Now, as they're beginning their buildup for what's going to happen in Rafah, it seems either this was an attack that they manufactured, or, it seems that Hamas has claimed this, but even that, to me, I just don't know how to read with all the different dynamics of Israel funding Hamas and the Qatar part versus the people in Gaza. It's very confusing. My point is that there do seem to be statements of Hamas claiming something that happened there, but on top of that, it's suiting Israel's interest to a T. And lying about what actually happened, which is the bombing of a military buildup, as opposed to the crossing location of aid. By the way, aid that they're also not letting through anyway. So it's an interesting dynamic. If we have to, we'll get to that tomorrow. I'd like to start with a couple of, well, first, a shout out of the clip that I played here. Here we go. I've seen this guy. I'm not familiar with his work necessarily, but I've seen his clips floating around. Really doing a good job calling out the contradictions, the logical contradictions. But his statements are in no way are meant to be taken, despite the fact that they already are in the comments, to imply that somehow Hitler was right or that that's the right side. If you read it like that, it's the only way you can ignore what he's highlighting, which is that Zionism is in the same, well, let's put it this way, that the logic that's used to make it seem like they're not committing genocide could be applied to the Nazi agenda in every single way. Doesn't mean they're even the same thing. It just shows you that what's happening is a willful disregard for the obvious reality in hopes of a politically favorable presentation that most powerful people in the world seem to be accepting, despite the fact that their entire population see right through this. But check this out. It's a good clip. Now, I want to point out a couple of quick things to start. Jason did a great clip of our recent show around the EPA ignoring PFAS, forever chemicals, to such a strong degree that it's built up so dangerously in human waste because it's so extreme in our environment and then in our bodies that even the waste that's now being used to make fertilizer, which is its own conversation, using human waste to make fertilizer in some kind of environmental process, is translating to dangerous levels of PFAS in the environment that's used in, and even translating to neighboring farms of places using that. Imagine that extreme stretch. That it's so dangerous in your body that your waste, even then used in a process, becomes so dangerous that it then gets translated through the use into neighboring farms. And I just talked about this, has killed cattle, sheep, horses, chickens. Per an investigation by legitimate investigators on the ground that's been all documented, you can prove for yourself. It's even going through more litigation at this point. And the crazy part of this is that it's obvious. It's been around for such a long time. We've been screaming about PFAS, about forever chemicals, about the products they're used in. And EPA's argument is, well, there's PFAS all over the place in normal things like sunscreen and toys. So it's just everybody consumes it. Therefore, that's why it's there. And they say, well, it meets regulations, so everything's okay. So we're just going to ignore the fact that animals are dying and things are dangerous, and we can test this stuff in our bodies, even though we know it's dangerous. And the EPA has acknowledged that it's dangerous, but yeah, it's everywhere. So, oh, well, that's actually what we're being told. It's absolutely mind-blowing. Now, I'm not going to say that I know for sure that every single person at the EPA is compromised or all of them. Maybe it's just such a defunct organization with so few people to do any good, manufactured that way, that it's never going to allow change. And maybe they are trying. I don't know. It doesn't seem that way. I only say that to be objective because I don't know their intentions. I know that there's very clear governmental processes that are used to hamstring things that might actually cause change. However, it's happening, this is being allowed. It's mind-blowing to me. So make sure you check this out. On top of that, I just wanted to highlight another post. Organic Consumers Association banned the highly toxic man-made fluorinated chemicals, PFAS, or forever chemicals. And just as a good article from May 1st, showing you how ubiquitous this is everywhere, and that they've known about it. Then people have been telling them about it forever, and that they've been ignoring it and sidestepping it until only just recently going, oh yeah, that's right. It can lower fertility in women by 40%. That was a recent post by, this last time it was Wake Up Today or AM Today, whatever that platform is, today.com, corporate media. And yet it still continues. Now, on another side note, glyphosate shouldn't be a side note, in fact, but we've been screaming about this for a decade or more. Here's a new peer-reviewed study, 2024, glyphosate presence in human sperm. You know how I've been keep telling people that every time it seems like at least somebody that kind of sneers it off and goes, you're being hyperbolic or you're being a conspiracy theorist, when I say it's literally everywhere. It's in the air you're breathing, it's in the clothes you're wearing, it's in the food, it's everywhere. Studies have confirmed this every which way. As I talk about the UK did a piss test for Parliament, and every single one of them had it in their urine. Or it's in the cottons they're used to make the clothes. So it's everywhere. It's in everything. This planet has been drenched. And that's not because of some one single bad Monsanto company. It's a huge part of it. It's because the government that allowed this to be the reality through compromising situations or whatever else. But this one shows you it's in your sperm. First report to positive correlation with oxidative stress in an infertile French population. It's just nonstop. If they cared, this would have stopped a long time ago, because there's a lot of people that have been, like hair on fire screaming about this because it's important. But here we are. Now, I'll also include the great interview I had with Stephanie Seneff, PhD, and Denny Rancourt, PhD, about glyphosate, mRNA, and spike proteins, and how they work in a synergistic fashion to destroy your health. I guess that's just one of those crazy coincidences that end up working exactly the way it would if you tried to make this a weapon and dangerous. But, coincidence. As well as a great clip that we just put out on Substack, another one coming tomorrow, in regard to the outstanding Arne Burkhardt interview, Never Before Seen Abnormal Blood Clots in COVID-19 Vaccinated Patients, written by Taylor Hudak as the interviewer as well. She also wrote the breakdown of this, which is very important. Now, what she's highlighting here is both just the general concept of never before seen abnormal clots, but also that this work he's showing has yet to be made public. Not to say that these are, there's been a lot of coverage of abnormal clots, so that's made clear. But this is actually a really important discussion, as well as to remember, again, I just pointed this out the other day. There's so many people out there that are taking this work and repackaging it, not including the source material. I'm glad the clips get out, but the point is, the problem is that if somebody sees that clip without any source material, we all know how this works today. People that don't want to see it will dismiss it. Usually they will anyway, but if there's somebody who just might be on the fence and they're able to scroll down and look at the full, the source material included in this link, which is the Last American Vagabond and the main site, you'll get to see all the source material and then links to larger databases and things that we've compiled to have all the source material to the actual clinical work done by Arne Burkhardt. So you can prove this stuff for yourself, as opposed to just seeing somebody talking about it, which gives the ability to just go, I'm not going to look at it. Now, there at least one that I saw, it was like the Sergeant Network or whatever on Twitter, just took the clip, posted their own logo on it, even though there was a clip that Taylor made. Like, everybody needs to call stuff like that out. Also, yes, for credit, but because people like that are grifters, are bottom feeders that are scrabbing other people's work, using it to claim anything without including the source material, and that has to be important to us. We have to make sure we let people prove these things to themselves. Otherwise, we end up in a circular motion, just like on Twitter, where we're all high-fiving about things we know and ignoring things we don't want to see. That's what they're trying to create. It's absolutely monumentally important. Now, 2 more points. I just discussed this with Zoe Smith, the whistleblower medical coder who wrote actually, I should have grabbed that. Let's see if it pops up. Hold on. There it is. Perfect. She wrote this amazing Substack post for our Substack. And this is actually the one that is, let's see. Oh, it is on. Okay. So yeah, my life in the thrill kill medical cult by Zoe Smith. And it's fascinating. It's terrifying. We had a great interview today that I'm most likely putting out tomorrow. And that's in regard to some important things that she saw, as she puts it, as the medical coder, having sort of the SimCity view of all the different agencies submitting their coding around all the actions and all the testing and all the things they're doing. Being able to see that there wasn't a rise in the things they said there were in the beginning, and it only coincided with the PCR tests and the injections. And it's fascinating. It's an important discussion. As well as just to include the fact that they're hyping it, that we should not be falling into, whether it's bird flu or anything else. 2 new COVID. Here's the actual website I was talking about. What is this? Not US. What is this? Today, America Today? I forget what the hell is that called again? But 2 new COVID variants, called apparently Flirt, it's ridiculous, are spreading in the US. What are the symptoms? Who cares? I really honestly don't care at this point. Do they do this with every new flu variant? Now that we know as a matter of fact, because of peer-reviewed science, that this was never worse than the flu, according to the Ionitis group and the leading science on the topic, proving that this is less than the flu for what was it, 90% or 80% of the entire age group population? That's peer-reviewed science. The point is, what's the issue with if there's a new thing floating around, if it's even real, first of all, right now, there's no reason to think that we should be any more concerned about anything else that's ever happened, and they're going to be hyping this to push new things. Ask yourself whether it could be. I'm not saying don't take precautions, wash your hands, do what you would normally do to stay safe. This is meant to push people into another state of fear, as always, and maybe it's the beginning of something new, like another COVID push. I don't know. I'm not going to lean into that until I see that happening. I see a lot of independent media that sort of do that hype for them. And I understand, even with good intentions, trying to go, get ahead of it. This might be the new thing, but I'm worried about doing that for them right now. Sort of like with the Rafah conversation, another angle. But just heads up, this is being pushed. If it begins to build, we'll be on it. Now, let's start with a conversation around censorship, but as it pertains to the Israel conversation. I want you to see this because this is actually really important in regard to the whole narrative partisan push that we see in every single topic. The Last American Vagabond was just censored on TikTok. I mean, like, literally not just censored, just deleted, no notification, no email, which whatever. We're censored from everywhere all the time. Like, I literally do not know anybody, Alex Jones included, who has been censored and in as many ways as we have. And I mean, to this moment, not where we get let back. I mean, Twitter's the only place we've ever been let back on. Every single other platform that you can name, in my opinion, other than the independent ones that are not censoring, mostly anyway, you know what I mean by some of them that I'm worried about, we have been censored and we still continue to be. TikTok, Instagram, I mean, all of them, guys. It's wild. Now, my point is this just happened. Jason was about to post a new clip for us and it's just gone. Couldn't find this. About half an hour ago when I had it up, it was still sort of flickering with gray in it. You could see gray outlets, but you couldn't see anything. Now it's just gone. And you can see clearly this is TikTok, The Last American Vagabond. Let's refresh and just in case. Oh, see, it flickered for a second, but it's gone. View profile. Let's see what happens there. Gone. Okay. So here's the interesting point. What are we being told about TikTok right now? That TikTok is I guess Chinese run or whatever the narrative is, a Singaporean CEO, but whatever. The point is, now, and again, US backing, but we'll pretend it's only China because that's what partisan Bannon tells you. But the point is that we're told this is a wildly anti-Israel, manipulative, Muslim, whatever the narratives are. They're all over the map, but ultimately converges with the idea that they're promoting anti-Israeli narratives, which are anti-Semitic, in order to manipulate the conversation. So if I'm the ones, how does that make sense here? Exactly. Explain to me why, if this isn't that what at least they're claiming we're doing? A bunch of anti-Semitic, negative Israel conversation? No, we're just breaking down the truth for you in an open-minded, objective way that's fighting for anybody oppressed, whether they be Jew or Muslim or Christian or anything. But what they want you to think is we're doing that. But here we are on TikTok and we're censored for doing that. So at the very least, that doesn't really add up, does it? And this is what gets hilarious for me, is that what we're really seeing today, which I can prove in every one of these platforms, is that there's a clear, direct censorship around things that are highlighting these problems. Even on TikTok. Now, yes, there's a lot of people out there that are on TikTok saying all these things. Every time I've said this before, and I'm not certain that this is why it's happening. Of course, I couldn't be. But what I keep highlighting is that the real censorship is around people that challenge the establishment and prove it. Just like we talked about with AstraZeneca or myocarditis or blood clots that Whitney and I got censored on Patreon near at the same week. Well, it was the same week, near the same moment. Why? Because we proved it. And they even said that in their documentation. You're allowed to talk about this stuff. You just can't spread misinformation. So the point was, well, it became misinformation when we used the source material that showed that it was happening. We now know that was the truth. It's happened. They proved it. Even in regard to AstraZeneca, that was recent. So here we are again, and I think this is because we're not just going Israel bad, and this is the history, which they can then go, yeah, danger is anti-Semitic, but they let it stay there. It's because we're going, here is the provable, documented truth about this discussion, which is usually somewhere in the middle. That's what I think. You guys can decide for yourselves. I think that's hilarious. Now, on the note of TikTok, here Ryan Grimm posted this, a co-sponsor of the TikTok ban said in a closed-door meeting that Congress moved to ban the app because, quote, you're seeing how these kids are being manipulated to oppose Israel's war effort. That's what they're actually saying. And they obtained the audio. You can listen to it right here. The point is, they're not talking about it because of misinformation or anti-Semitic. They're saying it's because it's hurting the interests of Israel. And if you don't think that, here's a clip of them talking about it. This is Arnaud Bertrand writing, incredible mask off moment. Romney and Blinken say that the ban of TikTok was directly because, quote, the impact of images has a very challenging effort on the narrative. These are not accidental words, ladies and gentlemen. It says the narrative being Israel's PR. I mean, even if you want to pretend it's something else, the images, not fake stuff, but the images, which we can prove are real, they admit it, they're real, are challenging for the narrative. That's the reality.
Well, I know that's not your area of expertise, but you have to have some thoughts on that, which is, I mean, as you've said, why has Hamas disappeared in terms of public perception? An offer is on the table to have a ceasefire, and yet the world is screaming about Israel. It's like, why aren't they screaming about Hamas?
Oh, we'll get to that. Exactly proven, exactly yet again today. They're either too ignorant to know or they're willfully lying to you about it. The fact that Israel is routinely disregarding what everybody else wants, including their own people, specifically about the ceasefire conversation, but everything else as well.
Accept the ceasefire, bring home the hostages. It said it's all the other way around.
No, they've refused the deal 4 or 5 times now, whether they like the deal or not, that would have brought their people home. They know that. He knows that. He's lying to you.
I mean, typically the Israelis are good at PR. What's happened here? How have they and we been so ineffective at communicating the realities there. And
we're on an intravenous feed of information with new impulses, inputs every millisecond. And of course, the way this is played out on social media has dominated the narrative. And you.
Yeah, by the way, interest of time, I'm going to leave it there. Make sure you watch this for yourself. Today is going to be less video content and just trying to go through the information for you guys to check out for time. Now, here's what Ryan Grimm says about the same clip. Incredible historical document here. Blinken says Israel's PR is failing because social media allows people a direct look at what's happening, shorn of the ability to mediate it, and it lands with emotional resonance. Romney then says that's why we moved to ban TikTok. You just can't make it up. They're straight up on the surface admitting, and I don't even think they're truly that self-aware to recognize what they're saying and how it means what it means. Here is an interesting point. American Jewish billionaire Alex Karp is using spyware to intercept phone calls from international citizens to Palestinians. His company, Palantir, is selling this information to the Unit 8200 in the IDF so that they can target civilians in Gaza. I'm planning on having a conversation with Whitney about this overlap, Palantir. It's very interesting. We've talked about it a lot, but more into the current perspective of this with the artificial intelligence and all that we've talked about. But my God, if we're talking about this overlap with very clear, high-level, like supranational entities that are using their power to allow them to do what we all see them doing. This is not some unique thing that can be shoved away on one person like Netanyahu as much as they really want that to be the case. Now, in regard to Al Jazeera, which is all this, just whether it's TikTok or whatever else, it's obvious that in some ways they're trying to hide what is being shown. And here is UN Human Rights Watch saying, we regret cabinet decisions of Israel to close the Al Jazeera in Israel, which, they all scream about how press freedom and Iran, and now they're removing this, and China, and Russia doing that. And then they shut down countless examples, but it's all because, well, they're bad guy. Oh, simple enough. Our ally said, so bad guy. So we'll just ignore all the things we said. Like the rules-based international order ploy it crumbled 6 months ago. It's so embarrassingly obvious that at the very least, they don't care about anything they claim they're fighting for when it comes to their own actions. That's clear. That cat is out of the bag. And it says a free and independent media is essential, says the UN, to ensuring transparency and accountability. I'm not even saying they agree with that, but they're sure stating it. Sure makes them look good. Maybe they mean it. Now, even more so, given tight restrictions on reporting from Gaza, freedom of expression is a key human right. We urge government to overturn the ban, which they won't. And you know why? It's obvious. As Asal Rod points out, this is why Israel's shutting down Al Jazeera. They don't want us to see what they're doing in Rafah, the last refuge of Palestinians in Gaza. This is from yesterday. Overnight, Rafah, Israel strikes targeted 11 homes. Not Hamas locations, not UN buildings, not hospitals or churches, but 11 homes. 21 bodies have been recovered. Now, this is being cited and discussed by UN entities. All you're going to get is people like Matt Miller acting like he's not sure investigations will go on and then never talking about it again, and people like Israel's lackeys screaming about how you're all racist. Otherwise, we know what's going on, and everyone else can see it in the world. They are murdering families in the location they claim that they're about to invade. They've been bombing them for months now. And that's why, because Al Jazeera highlights these things, whether or not you think they're honest, whether or not they lie every other point. The point is, we know that this is the accurate reality. Here's a clip that I planned, and I have planned for a long time, this one and a couple others, to go over when there's a day when there's not much else happening, which it never seems to happen. But this is a 16-minute video, which I highly recommend you watch in full, from Double Down News. It says, What Really Happened on October 7th by Richard Sanders. And this is an Al Jazeera investigation. Now, just want to play you the opening clip. And this is something you really need to watch the entirety, because the truth is shockingly obvious.
Jazeera's investigative unit, we've conducted a forensic, meticulous examination of the events of October the 7th. We uncovered very real crimes committed by Hamas and others. But I think what was perhaps most significant were the crimes we discovered that did not happen. And it's hugely concerning that these revelations have been virtually entirely ignored by the Western press. What's extraordinary is the Israelis were aware of the plans. Hamas were actually training quite openly for this operation, and they were actually placing the training videos online so anyone could view them. On the very night,
which makes me truly question, especially when we understand the proof and open statements by Netanyahu in his own Likud meeting in 2019. that they were funding Hamas in order to divide Palestine or Gaza with the West Bank. And so that has to make you at least ask whether there was some kind of a coordination there, which would change the whole perception on whether Hamas is fighting for one. I mean, I think it's multifaceted. I think there's a lot going on here. It's never as simple as one side or the other. There's always more vying agendas. But just all I'm saying is consider that possibility.
Of October the 7th, before dawn, spotters along the fence are reporting back to headquarters, and the head of Shin Bet and the head of military intelligence take this seriously enough that in the middle of the night they're up and talking to each other, and they conclude it's just another training exercise. And what is extraordinary is that they don't even raise the alert level to number 1, were hit by Apache helicopter, unarmed civilians as well. The Israelis were then extraordinarily slow to respond. Now, they scramble Apache helicopters, but there's no ground control. It's pretty clear that in the chaos, some hostages at least were hit by Apache helicopter fire.
Now, I'll leave it there. Make sure you watch this. Here's just what he quoted from it. The kibbutzes we've identified 18 people who were pretty much certainly killed by the police. That's not even debatable anymore. Haaretz and Mondoweiss and 972 and I mean, countless. Gray Zone have covered this, explicitly showing you that this is the reality. Their own people, helicopter pilots, tank drivers. The head security of Kibbutz Be'eri told publicly that he saw them kill their own people. They bombed the cars as they left, and they've openly said that they shot. I mean, it's shocking that we can't have a public conversation about this. It says, kill everyone, then allow people to be captured. I mean, these are statements made by the IDF. Make sure you watch this. Now, in that same point, the lies, they just keep spreading no matter what. People like Elon Levy, where he says, we vowed never again. I guess that only applies in one direction, right? But the last time anti-Semites incinerated Jews was 7 months ago. And just shows an oven, I guess, which has no bearing. That oven is not in Gaza. It's just a random picture. If you search it on, it's just from something completely different because that's how they roll, you know? But the point is, and he says never again is now, I guess, but except in regard to Gaza, because most of the Jews protesting this, especially in the protests out there in campuses, which are in most cases funded by Jewish organizations, if not half them there are Jewish with Holocaust survivors, and they make it out to be a bunch of Jew hatred because that's how maniac, how lost they are. But the point is that they're the ones telling you never again means for anybody, not just Jews. And they're watching it happen to people in Palestine. Now, the point though, incinerated Jews, you know what that's referring to? The lie that they were burned, which did not happen according to Haaretz, which I'll include that link for you, which you can read for yourself. He knows it's there. He just hopes you don't know about it or don't care and just listen to him or blindly regurgitate his lies. This is the Haaretz, if it'll finally translate. There we go. That just simply pointing out that that not all these things happen in reality. And they get into the baby in an oven. They get into the stomach cut open, the burning alive, the beheading of children. None of it. And they'll tell you in the article, did not happen. Lies. And yet here he is just lying for it again because he wants you on this Holocaust Remembrance Day to fall back into the idea that this is happening all over again. But here, Captain Grove highlights the reality. And in this video we just pointed to, they discuss the same thing, the lies. And here's just a couple of other points he will make. Paradigm Shift says, never forget how Hamas burned all those babies. And the highlights the video of what's his name, Eli Beer, who Gray Zone's broken down aggressive. A lot of people have highlighted how dishonest this person is, saying a woman has had her baby cut out of her stomach. Nope. Provable lie. Everybody has admitted that's a lie, and they still keep pushing that narrative. And I mean, people in the IDF, Haaretz, leading people in the conversation. And the point is that these are the people they're citing to when they talk about burning people alive. Or simple reality. Are you talking about when the IDF shot Israelis with Apache helicopters and tank shells? The only munitions that were there capable of doing that? But nobody cares in that conversation that wants to hide the reality because it works to make the lie sound like we're doing it all over again. Back to Holocaust, that's the only argument they have. Now, of course, if this wasn't a provable reality, the bottom line is not to go into the hypothetical, the evidence is there. They're lying. They know they're lying. And yet they keep pushing this. That's insulting to Jews. That's insulting to Holocaust survivors. It's insulting to anybody but Zionists. They don't care. Now, in regard to the threats, this is actually crazy to me that they're willing to do this yet again in regard to the International Criminal Court, not the World Court, the Court of Justice. This is the ICC, who is pretty commonly compromised, in my opinion. And this is not a unique opinion. They've shown themselves to be pretty meek when it comes to finally, going the full 9 yards. So now, seeing as how they seem to be stepping further, investigating, asking questions, Netanyahu, and his own government. It's been reported even by their own people that they're pretty terrified of this. Haaretz said the same. Now you've got him pulling all the strings, pulling all those pocket strings tied right to Mike Pompeo and everybody else. They jump up and go, how dare you? We'll come after you. Don't forget, this is not new. Mike Pompeo says the ICC joins forces with Hamas, or if they do, that's how he's framing this. Right out of the talking points. So now the ICC is Hamas if they just do their job? Doesn't this seem stupid? Yes, and this is why most people are seeing through this. He's saying it should face the full weight of U.S. sanctions. Again, showing you. So he's saying if you do your job, we're going to break the law, because that's what that means. U.S. unilateral sanctions is not how that's supposed to work. It is, in fact, illegal when you break it down. It's supposed to be international entities from some kind of a UN body discussing this and handing down sanctions in a world sense, not individual nations handing out unilateral sanctions as if they're the rulers of the world. That's what they do. But so do other countries too now, because they do that. But the U.S. is the one that really started this momentum. They're just going to sanction entities that don't do what they want. And ask yourself how they're capable of sanctioning an international body. It's not a country. They're not really. The point is that they have so much financial control that they'll just do what they want to anyway. If they join forces with Hamas by investigating Israel. Because it's not like Israel's never committed a crime anywhere else, ever, right? In no other context. We're not talking about the crimes against Libya, the crimes against Syria. It's just they'll joining with Hamas if they do an investigation. That should make you disgusted. That should make you recognize what these leaders, in gigantic air quotes, actually care about. Here's what they actually said. Now, this is a scoop apparently broke. Mehdi Hassan, what Lens Veritas says, I've looked into that, has just exposed a letter from U.S. Republican senators directly threatening the ICC. You'll want to hear this. The quote, "You have been warned. Target Israel and we will target you." That's a threat. There's no way around it. And let's not forget, as I'll actually show you first, 2018. John Bolton threatens the ICC with sanctions if they dare investigate the U.S. or Israeli war crimes. Now, if you actually read what he said, and this is just one of the quotes. If the court comes after us, Israel or our allies, we will not sit quietly. The point is, in his many different back and forths, he openly implies he will go after their families. That's a terrifying reality. Pompeo has done the same, and he's doing it again now. Here's what the letter says, signed by all the usual suspects: Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Rick Scott. Ridiculous. Here's what it says, and this is actually pretty wild. Dear Mr. Khan of the ICC, we write regarding the reports that the ICC may be considering issuing international arrest warrants against Netanyahu and other Israeli officials. Such actions are illegitimate and lack legal basis, and if carried out, will result in severe sanctions against you and your institution. You realize they're investigating for war crimes, not even necessarily to the point of genocide, even though the World Court has said that there is merit for the investigation of genocide. And so they're just investigating for crimes. Do you realize how many crimes have been proven? How many human rights groups have highlighted the murdering of children, the raping of families, the pillaging of families, the raping of individuals, the destruction of land, the destruction of farmland? I mean, guys, just since October 7th. But going back 75 years. And they're going to threaten them for even investigating this. I just don't know how anybody doesn't see the truth behind that. Even if you stand with Israel, the U.S. government stepping in to do this should be chilling. It says the ICC is attempting to punish Israel for taking legitimate actions of self-defense. 7 months by the way. So 7 months after October 7th, and we're still calling this self-defense against their Iranian-backed aggressors. These people are children. In fact, in your own words, it says, you witnessed, quote, scenes of calculated cruelty conducted by Hamas in Israel following October 7th. That's somehow you can only hold one thought in your mind at one time? Like, let's just say you believe everything they said about Hamas on October 7th. That does not change the provable crimes of collective punishment, starvation, everything they've done. But that's how they want you to read it. It's all okay because they started it, like we're in kindergarten. Or the fact that let's pretend like we don't know that Israel funded Hamas, and so they're at least in some way culpable, and it's far more than that, for what happened. Or the fact that they saw it coming and didn't do anything. But let's pretend that doesn't exist. Because people like Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, and Rubio are willfully blind to anything about that makes Israel look like the aggressor. It says these arrest warrants would align the ICC with the largest state sponsor of terrorism and its proxy. Again, So by arresting an Israeli entity for crimes, it aligns you with their enemies. This is the most childish logic. So this is the same as saying that believing what Russia says about our elections, even though it's true, is wrong because it helps Russia. No, it's the truth. So believing it is the truth. It doesn't matter who else it helps. You're just trying to hide the truth. So by doing this, you're simply aligning them by default with the person fighting Israel because you don't like what they're showing. That's not how that works. They're not standing up and going, I'm joining Hamas because we're investigating Israel. It doesn't matter who they were fighting. They're committing crimes, so it deserves to be investigated. These are the leaders of the so-called free world, guys. That's what these are, people standing up for your democracy as they shout down anything that goes against their agenda. It says, to be clear, there is no moral equivalence between Hamas's terrorism and Israel's justified response. It takes a special kind of stupid to make those kind of statements right now when the world, and they know it, sees it. The ICC is also prohibited by its charter from proceeding in any case unless the relevant government is unwilling or unable to police themselves. This is how they use this to manipulate the people that don't know that Palestine is, in fact, a part of this. Yes, Israel and the United States are not, which should tell you something. They use this as a mechanism against anybody else, but they themselves are not a part of it, so they act like they're somehow independent of it. Palestine is. And all this time they try to act like, well, Hamas was voted in. Hamas is their government. Okay, then they are their own place, which means they have the right to work with the ICC, which means they have the right to bring in this investigation. They're terrified of that. It says, you yourself have said Israel has trained lawyers who advise commanders in a robust system intended to ensure compliance with international law. Ridiculous. It says, by issuing warrants, you would be calling into question the legitimacy of Israel's laws. No, they know damn well we're talking about Palestine. But it says issuing arrest warrants for the leaders of Israel would not only be unjustified, it would expose your organization's hypocrisy and double standards. Yeah, kettle black right there. Cook pot black, or pot calling the kettle black. Your office has not issued arrest warrants for Iran's supreme leader or any Iranian official. Okay, that's interesting. Syrian President Assad. Okay, Hamas leaders. Okay, so what's their argument here? So their argument is because we said they're bad guy, you're supposed to arrest them. Not evidence aside. So what they're saying is you didn't do it when we wanted you to, so you're just doing it because they want you. No, that's not what's happening. They're investigating this because there is so much evidence that they can't not. I still don't think it's going to come to pass, but realize how obvious that is. Again, the World Court, everybody, human rights groups, United Nations. I mean, this has been a waterfall of evidence. They've stood up and screamed what they're doing themselves. And all they do is go, you haven't arrested Iran's leader. For what? Because you guys claim he did something that you can't prove, that I can prove you're lying about? It's children we're dealing with, guys. Children with a lot of overwhelming power. It's terrifying. It says, nor have you issued an arrest warrant for China, Xi Jinping, or Chinese officials. For what? I'm not saying they're not committing crimes. I can guarantee you they're committing crimes. Can we prove these things? Are you even alluding to a crime? Or are you just going there? We don't like them. You should be going after them instead. Stomping your feet. Finally, neither Israel nor the United States are members of the ICC. There's the other point I was saying. It's kind of the one they were making right here. And are therefore outside of your organization's supposed jurisdiction. Again, guys, they're very aware of the nuance here that Palestine is, and they're the ones calling on the ICC. It says, if you issue a warrant for the arrest of the Israeli leadership, we will interpret this is the threat, not only as a threat to Israel's sovereignty, right, but who cares about Palestine, but to the sovereignty of the United States. Yeah, exactly like we're telling you. They see it as the same. So who cares if that puts Americans at risk, or in general? But if you do this, we will take that as an attack on our sovereignty. It's not. Israel is not the United States. Attacks on Israel's sovereignty are not attacks on American sovereignty. But that's what your supposed leaders, your rulers, are telling you. You know why? Because they're compromised. Because they're acting in the interest of another country at the expense of Americans. Now, it says our country demonstrated in the American Service Members Protection Act the lengths to which we will go to protect that sovereignty. Read Israel. That's what they're saying right there. So there's how many times I've told you the American legislation, it's more now than ever. But if you go through in the doc and just look at any current or pending, it's any moment I've looked, it's half of them involve Israel. Random things that have nothing to do with this somehow have shoehorned in interest of Israel. There's a reason for that. AIPAC is an obvious point, but much, much more than that. And they're literally telling you, here's an act we did that shows you what we'll do if you attack Israel. at the expense of Americans. The United States, it says, will not tolerate politicized attacks. Not because we can prove their crimes or that they're standing up and gleefully showing you their crimes and then taunting you to do something about it. Not that, but because we just want to go after them because it's politics. Imagine watching the biggest genocide that most people alive today have ever seen and then calling it politics. It says, if you move forward with the measures indicated in this report, we will move to end all American support for the ICC, which as far as I can tell doesn't exist. They're not a party to it. They attack it anytime it comes after them. They've threatened their families. So I'm pretty sure you don't support the ICC unless it goes after the guys you don't like, which shows you your hypocrisy. But it goes and sanction your employees and associates. How does that even remotely make sense? That is the kind of, that's like a Lindsey Graham action. What does the employee have to do with what the ICC is doing? That's like saying we're going to attack your family. That's like saying we're going to censor your family's bank accounts or financially censor because we don't like what your website's doing. This is what the U.S. government is. Just understand that. They are belligerent. They are aggressive. They do not care about the things that they point at other people have to abide by. We're going to go after your individual employees and associates, and then they go bar you and your families from the United States. You have been warned. If you've ever seen a better example of an authoritarian government acting authoritarian, and I mean like aggressively showing you that they are not what they ever pretended to be, it's right in front of you. Meanwhile, they're all screaming about a bunch of college kids pushing and showing what they're actually doing. That's the biggest threat to this country, not the fact that these people aren't even fighting for you. It's terrifying. Now, again, John Bolton had threatened their families and threatened things in the past, like a lot of them have. Well, let's go through a couple other posts since then. 2018. Guess what? ICC was investigating Israel. Went the same way. Now, I don't know at this point whether this was them trying again and getting shouted down, but they got attacked, they got threatened, they got sanctioned. And guess what happened? It didn't go anywhere. Here it is in 2019. It can't be fixed. Senior ICC judge quits. Why? In protest of the United States and Turkey meddling in their affairs, most of which revolved around Israel and their own crimes in Afghanistan and Iraq. But attack them because they're looking at what we do that's wrong. This is not what the moral entity does. Here is 2019. The ICC, again, to investigate Israeli government war crimes because they don't exist though, right? And of course, they got threatened, they got attacked, they got sanctioned, they backed away every single time. December 2020. ICC dropping inquiry into British war crimes in Iraq, showing the failure of the international legal system. Why? Because they got threatened by the United States and everybody else around it, and they dropped the ball. Again, that's how this works. Here's 2021. Israel calls ICC anti-Semitic for deciding it has jurisdiction over war crimes. Yeah, do you see what that says? For stating its mandate, as long as it applies to Israel. You're a racist! Only when it applies to Israel. So when they charge the United States with crimes, are they anti-Christian? It's a stupid argument. They're looking at the crimes of these entities and they're calling them racist. Why? Because that's what they do. Zionism uses the threat of racism to hide its crimes behind the Jewish population. Here's 2021. ICC again investigates Israeli war crimes. But guess what? Went the same way. So here, talking about the U.S. government statements around all this, Lindsey Graham says, in regard to Netanyahu giving a speech around never again is now. I mean, think about how insultingly stupid that is. While you're committing genocide, you're claiming never again. That's just disgusting. And Lindsey Graham, Mr. Belligerent, pro-Israel, anti-American Lindsey Graham says, well said, Mr. Prime Minister. I can assure you American people and Congress will have your back. Your fight is our fight. Again, either so shockingly unaware and not, just completely out of touch with the American people or not caring, because that's not what the vast majority of Americans think. It's just not. Polls have shown that. Both sides of the paradigm, it's not the reality. They have their strong support, but it is not even close to the majority of Americans or the world. They've lost it. Your fight is our fight? No. Their fight is your fight, Lindsey Graham, at the expense of Americans, and we all see that now. It's coming out crazy. It's very clear right now. Here's what Kim Iverson said in regard to his post where he goes, if this report is true, it is beyond the pale. And this was, I forget which one this was. Hold on. It was, oh, yes. Okay. So I'm glad it's right here. It's the same point I was going to get to. See, I'm always ahead of myself. U.S. put a hold on ammunition shipments to Israel, which I highly doubt, actually. Like, I actually literally do not believe that that's happening. I mean, they're just no longer doing it in a public way. That'd be my personal opinion. But at the very least, it's still important that they publicly claim to do that, because that is a big deal. And Israel's going to call them out for it anyway, because that's what they do. They attack their allies when they barely step out of line. But he says this report is, if this report is true, how do you not know if it's true? Aren't you in the government? I mean, that's just him trying to water it down. I think that's how childish people are. He says our best ally in the region and one of our best allies in the world is responding to one of the most vicious attacks against Jewish people since the Holocaust. It was not an attack on Jewish people. That is your game. It was an attack on the occupier of Israel. And yes, there were crimes committed, but it was also a legal act of armed resistance around that, provably. Fourth Geneva Convention occupied. I am certain, he says, that the United States Congress is fully on board for continuing to supply military assistance to the Jewish state without conditions. I can't believe they keep saying that. So if they murder a bunch of children, doesn't matter. No conditions. We don't care. You break the law, doesn't matter. No conditions. You can do whatever you want with them. You could bomb your own families. Doesn't matter. No conditions. Go. That's what the words mean. There is no alternative meaning to no conditions as they fight for their survival. Is that what's happening? No, as they murder another group who fights for their survival. Israel's destruction of Hamas is non-negotiable. Well, I don't think literally anybody other than people fighting for the ceasefire or even calling for you to stop going after Hamas. I'm sure plenty of them think that, but that's nowhere in the conversation that I can see. They're calling for ceasefire, and you call that not going after something that you're going to go after either way, and we all know it. Here's what Kim had said. How is Israel our best ally exactly? Just even on that one point, gets so many examples of how they've publicly made fun of almost everything in this government, publicly from numerous officials said how easy it is to manipulate the American government, how easy it is to make them do what they want, how little they think of them, how little they think of Christians. I mean, it's everywhere. And yet Lindsey Graham, grovels at the feet of Israel. It's ridiculous. I don't know how they don't see that. But she says, have they ever sent troops to any of our numerous wars? No. But they did send orange juice during the Korean War. Are they our largest trading partner? No, that would be Mexico, Canada, and get this, China, even over Israel. We don't even share the same main religion, cultural heritage, or language. That would be the UK, Australia, and Canada. So she asked, do you mean they are your best ally, Lindsey Graham, because they spend so much money through their lobbies, PACs on your campaigns? Yep. Now, the scoop is that they are holding ammunition. I just want to highlight again, people like Fetterman saying the same thing. Hard disagree. Frankly, nobody cares, Fetterman. But it says, I have consistently opposed any conditions on supporting Israel. That's what they're supposed to say, apparently. But I don't know why they think that's okay. Zero conditions. They can do whatever they want. Who cares about the Leahy laws or whatever else? That doesn't matter. No conditions as they battle in the State Department of how they're supposed to be abiding by certain laws. You realize conditions could be laws too, right? So no laws are bound in regard to their support for Israel. No conditions. Silly. Now, in regard to the deals we're talking about, Hamas accepts ceasefire deal. Now, this is from today. It says Israel examining proposal. IDF airstrikes target Rafah. So just showing you, as we're pretending this is a deal, they're literally bombing civilians with nowhere to go. That's how gross this all is. And that's why the politicians that pretend it's not happening are equally disgusting, because it's unbelievably clear. And that's why people in the UN and UNRWA and the human rights groups, the doctors that are seeing it, are so horrified. Most of them because they probably didn't see how terrible things truly were. Thought they would stand up and fight for their own people. Nope. Not. Ask the American Palestinians how it's working out for them. Point is, everyone's reported this, that Hamas has accepted a deal. A deal, by the way, that was being developed by Qatar and the others involved, that Israel was well aware of. And guess what happens? Well, first of all, this is the multiple group showing you this. Hamas accepted ceasefire proposal, but Israel said it was unacceptable. Here's AP saying Israel leaders have approved a military operation into the Gaza Strip of Rafah. Gaza Strip city of Rafah. So all we're showing you here is, first of all, that the moment it seemed like there was actually some kind of a deal, what have we been telling you? They don't want it. Their own people see that. They want to continue this. And I actually think at the expense of even the hostages. Hannibal directive. I think that's provably obvious at this point. But the reality is, the moment it started to seem like it was going to happen, quickly approve the thing that's supposed to stop. Everybody in this deal except Israel, the primary thing they're trying to stave off right now is the invasion of Rafah. So the moment that it seems like it's going to happen, let's invade Rafah. I keep telling you, this is a tool that's been used. As we just showed you, Israeli officials, other people involved, experts on the military side of this have told you, and I'm talking about former IDF and current, that there is no military objective in Rafah. It's a lie. There's nothing they will accomplish. It will not end the war. Hamas is all over Gaza. It's not just in Rafah. They're pretending this is something to use it to manipulate the world. And guess what also? The murdering of all the people that are going to happen in that process so they can achieve some small military manipulative gain. It's disgusting. The deal, though, scroll down real quick. They updated it. Here we go. Here's what it says. The proposed ceasefire of the phases. This is what Israel disregarded. And again, even though they were going back and forth about this, Hamas said on Monday it has agreed to a 3-phase deal for a ceasefire and hostages for a prisoner swap. Although an Israeli official said the deal was not acceptable to Israel because terms have been softened. My point, though, is that this was in the back and forth. This wasn't just Hamas standing back and saying no. This was going, Qatar was involved. It says the United States, which alongside Qatar and Egypt, have played a role mediating the talks, said it was studying the Hamas response and would discuss it with Middle East allies. Based on details announced so far by Hamas officials and an official briefed on the talks, the deal that the Palestinian group said it had agreed to included the following. Phase 1, 42-day ceasefire period. So, it's not even a complete ceasefire. So that's actually pretty shocking to me because I never thought that they would cave on that. So it clearly shows you yet again that Hamas is in fact even caving on their red line. Hamas released 33 Israeli hostages in return for Israel releasing Palestinians from Israeli jails. Israel partially withdraws troops, not even a full withdrawal from Gaza, and allows the free movement of Palestinians from South to North Gaza. That's a huge issue for them for many reasons, because one of the things they're doing, which I highlighted for you, is getting people in northern Gaza to renounce their right of return, filming them doing so, and having them return any documents they have. I mean, this is bigger than people realize. So they can't do that. So now they're stuck. Now, phase 2, another 42-day period that features an agreement to restore a sustainable calm to Gaza. Language that an official brief in the talks said Hamas and Israel had actually agreed in order to take discussion of the permanent ceasefire off the table. See my point? So they did remove that line. The complete withdrawal of most Israeli troops from Gaza, which they could obviously put right back in the moment this was over, which I guarantee they will. Hamas releases Israeli reservists and some soldiers in return for Israel releasing Palestinians from jail. Phase 3, the completion of an exchange body, so the rest of it, I guess, so all of them back and forth, and starting the implementation of reconstruction according to the plan overseen by Qatar, Egypt, and the United Nations, ending the complete blockade of Gaza Strip, which they'll never allow. So all this shows you is that this is Hamas with Qatar and Egypt and the United Nations and the United States coming to an agreement, and Israel at the last second going, screw that, invade Rafah, acting like Hamas is the one that somehow didn't do something, like every other time before this. It is so infuriating that we even have to keep going through this because of screamers online and elsewhere, and most of which are your U.S. government, by the way, who scream falsehoods and pretend like it's not the reality because of their own self-interest. Suppressed News highlights breaking ceasefire terms and everything you need to know. You can read through it more here. We just read the brief part of it. Here's Hamas's statement. The fighter, it says, the fighter brother, Ismail Haniyeh, head of the political bureau of the Hamas movement, had a phone call with the Qatari prime minister and with the Egyptian minister of intelligence, and informed them that the Hamas movement's approval of the proposal regarding the ceasefire agreement. So here is Merav Zonzin from 972 magazine. Hamas has not provided a formal answer. Now, this is before they officially said yes, right? So just realizing that this is what she said even before they agreed. They hadn't even given a formal answer. So my point is, why right then is Israel not so if they hadn't answered, that means at that moment there was pretend action that Israel was willing to accept it. So if it had been given to Hamas to answer and the mediators are involved, how do you not see that that's Israel now after they say yes, going, wait, never mind. And it says, and already Israel is making moves on Rafah. So her point was before they even answered, Israel's already beginning to make this happen. This is meant to destroy this like they have in every other circumstance. Every other pretend deal in the past, they made sure it would look like Hamas refused it, or Palestine in general, so they could blame it on them, even though they made sure, as we now can prove, that it was so full of poison pills and manipulations that they would never accept it. The decision in part of Israel's effort to make it appear as if it wants the deal and is doing everything to get one while Hamas is rejecting, but this is misleading. Again, this is an Israeli writer for 972 magazine. Hamas did indicate it will agree to Egyptian proposal and move ahead with the first stage, relying on guarantees that Israel will end war later on, which I guarantee they won't. There were several reports to this effect. You can read them from Israeli journalists. It says Israel's portrayal of Hamas rejectionism is factually incorrect at this point. It looks like Netanyahu saw that Egypt and the U.S. pressure was working and decided to back out. Well, look at that. Pretty sure I already retweeted that. But it says it also ignores the fact that Israel's war objectives were and continue to be indirect conflict. So that's the point. They've already stated that they do not care about getting the hostages back, or at least at the secondary. They said that twice in the very first week of this. If you want the hostages, you have to agree to the proposal to end the war. The entire security establishment is behind it as well. The Hamas mortar and rocket attack from Rafah on Israeli soldiers, which is the truth of it, and if we don't get there with time, which it doesn't look like we will, that's the reality. They bombed soldiers preparing for an invasion of Rafah, and all the liars like Elon Levy pretend they bombed the aid that they're not bringing in. It was a pretty flimsy effort to kill two birds with one stone. But he says they bombed Israeli soldiers near the Karim Shalom Sunday night that killed 3 and injured several more seriously, and is also contributing to deterioration and could be a primary motive for Israel actions today. But bottom line remains, Israel's portrayal of Rafah invasion as necessary for a win for Israeli security does not have legs. Numerous people inside their own apparatus have made that clear. Any offensive in Rafah, she writes, in addition to further killing and destruction in Gaza, will hurt chances to return hostages. Everybody knows that. They're lying to you. In regard to the Israeli government, the U.S. government, it will also escalate the region, escalate the problem. There is also no reason to believe that a military op, whether limited or full scale in Rafah, will provide a different outcome than such ops have in other parts of Gaza, which is absolute destruction. Now, here is her point. Gathered outside the occupation forces, their headquarters in Tel Aviv of Israel, families of the Israeli captives are literally chanting, "Deal now." Now, every time I show you this, people like Elon Levy grab this, post it, and say, see, they're calling on the UN to... That's not what they're doing. He'll lie about it. I already see him doing it. The point is, that's not what they're saying. This is what the writer we were just discussing, Marav from 972 magazine, says one woman whose son is currently a hostage says if the government doesn't go for the deal, the country will burn. Here is her saying that on record. Only Israeli people can end this massacre, sadly. Families of Israeli detainees in Gaza says, quote, Hamas agreed to the deal. The government must agree now. Otherwise, we will burn the country. And of course, it gets very little coverage because it's challenging and people are expressing it. Probably Twitter as well. Here's Ben Shapiro lying about it, as usual, because he's such a coward today. He can't acknowledge even the basic truth around what's going on in Israel because he's locked himself into a corner. He's painted himself clearly into a position from which he can't return because he spent the last 7 months screaming falsehoods. He says, here's how this went down, even though we just broke it down for you. Israel, here are the terms of our proposed ceasefire, as if that's the only thing that matters, right? Hamas, no, we'll fire rockets at your soldiers at a humanitarian aid entry. Well, at least he admits there were soldiers there, but it was not even the same location. The bottom line is that's not what happened. There was a deal on the table that Hamas accepted that Israel backed out of. And he says, Israel, okay, we're going into Rafah. Which, by the way, why is that some kind of counterbalance? He says, Hamas, we accepted a ceasefire negotiation with ourselves. No, at worst, they accepted it with everybody but Israel, but that's not even what happened. And he knows that. This is cowardice. And he goes, media, Hamas accepts ceasefire. Right. Because it's clear that all of the media is clearly on the side of Gaza. Really? You mean all the ones that have been purposefully lying for this agenda for Israel for 7 months, barely squeaking out truth here and there? And again, they're telling you, the people on the ground, Ben, are telling you that that's not the reality. Great journalism, bud. Here's Elon Levy. And this is funny because it's a follow-up to what he said before. Lying, right? He came out early going, that's not true. Hamas did this. And he goes, oops, wait a minute. It looks like Hamas didn't agree to the ceasefire because the only one that matters is the one Israel wants. He says it agreed to a ceasefire. That's supposed to win you over? What a complete moron. Like the bottom line is we can see publicly from all corporate media, including Israeli media, that there was a negotiation going on. So when you admit they agreed to a ceasefire, all that proves is Israel backed out. It says to a proposal that Israel hasn't agreed to and maybe hasn't even seen. Oh, maybe? Great job, bud. Maybe? They literally just commented about it in corporate media that they knew it and just... These are people that are so desperate that they just have to lie in hopes they win somebody over. But nope, doesn't matter. And I love this guy says, Elon, you literally got fired for lying. Shut up. The truth. But here's Haaretz. With Hamas talks on verge of collapse, Netanyahu puts up a rejectionist front. And the director of the CIA was dispatched to the Middle East in an effort to save the deal, and Netanyahu is considered to be the main obstacle. But let's just listen to this fired liar over here who says something different with text on Twitter, because that's smart, right? It's how embarrassing for you. Here's Dan Cohen, and this is actually really important. Associated Press says the Hamas announces it has accepted the deal. He writes, if Israel agrees to the ceasefire, which I don't see happening, but if they do, this is interesting. And this is where the pressure's coming from, I guess, in Dan Cohen's reporting, and I agree with him. Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, the two, as far as two of the most maniacal, psychopathic in this whole thing, will collapse the Netanyahu government, and an unprecedented upheaval in Israeli society will begin. Israel's gigantic internal rift, temporarily papered over by the trauma of October 7th and the war of Gaza, which is the truth, they were boiling over, wanting to lock up Netanyahu right before this, will exacerbate to new levels, potentially collapsing the state of Israel. If Israel rejects, which it just did for the most part, it will further cement its status as an international pariah and only delay the inevitable. Israel has no good options because it's a prisoner of its own Zionist ideology. Exactly what I'm saying. Hamas won October 7th. Israel will admit defeat or destroy itself. That's what he said. Now here what was it again? He was, that's right. The official account for the Secretary General of the League of Arab Nations, speaking for the Arab nations and simply saying, now some of these were hashtags that I can't read, but the general point is, despite what's been going on and Hamas accepting the deal, Israel's maneuvers indicate its bad intentions. It says he calls on everybody in the Western countries to support Israel, to assume the responsibilities and restrain the occupying force to prevent further deterioration of the situation, as Palestinian civilians are the ones paying the price. Won't matter. I don't think they're going to care. Now, just a couple last points because I'm going to have to get out of here, guys. BM points out something very important. This is a couple of days ago on Channel 12. Shimon Boker, vice president of the World Likud, the international arm of Netanyahu's own party, says, quote, I think we should have gone into Rafah yesterday already. He says there are no uninvolved civilians there. You have to go in and kill and kill and kill. We have to kill them before they kill us. How are we still pretending this is not the obvious reality when it's literally on corporate media in Israel and we're all just acting like it's not happening, or some people are? Wow. This is the truth, guys. This is what they're trying to accomplish if we just care to pay attention. Now, I think I'm going to end there. Have to, actually. I'll rapidly go through the Rafah points. Caitlin Johnstone. I'll actually skip that for time. Here's the point. I just want to include some of the points of people highlighting the fact the British Air Force bringing in military equipment could mean, we've seen it before, but this does seem to be a build-up support for what's going to happen in Rafah. Dr. Joe points out the image I used today. This is Rafah this is, I think, from a month ago or so. The point is, they're preparing to invade this location, guys. All this other small area, that's all people, humanitarian tents, all packed around this. 600,000 children, most of which are sick and injured, that they're going to invade. They have nowhere to go. Howard Beckett points out, Israel issues an evacuation order for 250,000 people in Rafah. They don't have anywhere to go. Egypt won't let them pass. They pleaded with the Israeli to not usher in unleash the slaughter in Rafah. They've been ignored. Everybody sees it building. Nobody seems to be powerful enough to stop it. This person points out the images reveal Israeli military's reinforcements near the border. So all this is showing you, again, Al Jazeera, which is why they don't want it to be there, is that they've literally barricaded them in. They can't go to Egypt. They won't let them through. They can't go back north. They're in a box right now. So when they begin to do the invasion on top of the bombing they've been doing for months, this is guaranteed to be a slaughter. Again, that's what I guess they're trying to leverage that against the world. James Elder from UNICEF says we are told by Israel that this will be a limited offensive. We're told there would be no way the South would endure the same thing as the North, admitting that they just murdered everybody. But except Khan Yunis, which is in the South, is very clearly absolutely destroyed. They're lying. Red Crescent points out their headquarters show thousands of civilians evacuating. They're already fleeing for their lives, many of which, just like before, are getting shot at or getting attacked, just like every other example we've seen. Israel officially announces the beginning of their operations in Rafah, which doesn't mean it's going to happen. I feel like they've done that before. That's why I've been cautious about this reporting, but it does seem that things are beginning. So I'm very worried about where this goes for the rest of the night. We just make sure we're paying attention, make sure we're documenting everything, because I think this Hopefully it doesn't happen, but I believe this is going to be pretty bad if it goes forward like way Israel wants it to. And as Sarah Abdallah covers, they're already attacking in Rafah, just like they already have been, though, for months, but they're beginning. Defenseless, starving people in tents, and they're bombing them right now. IDF strikes Hamas terror targets in Rafah as it's already beginning. That's how this works, right? But here's why they say this. Here's Fox News. Hamas kingpin holed up in Gaza, or likely in Qatar in some air-conditioned room, doling out things Israel wants them to say, my personal opinion, aside from the reality that Israel has an open policy of human shields called neighbor procedure that nobody wants to talk about. The claim is experts say they're using human shields. You want to see why they say that? Great journalism. This one guy who is an American analyst simply says, my sources tell me, which we don't get to know who they are, the number one leader of Hamas organization has 15 to 20 hostages protecting his family. That's why. Human shields. That's it. That's all you get. You get one guy saying his sources that we don't get to see claim he's got this many people in Gaza that can prove. Even though there's not a single point of evidence we've ever seen since October 7th that proves any of these things. Certainly could be. It wouldn't surprise me. Meanwhile, we can literally prove how they continue to use human shields in Gaza. Israel. Lastly, the hostages that have come home continue to tell us that they watched them kill people, their own people. We'll just leave it there. We were going to get into the Kareem crossing. Just recognize, guys, that they're lying about it, like damn near everything else. And also recognize that they are continuing to blockade. U.S. senior official says northern Gaza is now in full-blown famine. Here, Philip Lazzarini, Gaza said the Israeli authorities continue to deny humanitarian aid. This was on yesterday. And they just keep lying about it. Francesca Albanese, what I have seen rejected by Israel and stored in warehouses in northern Sinai is not just critical supplies for survival in Gaza. It's the solidarity of so many people from the world. Brazil, France, Kuwait, Singapore. You can see their aid just sitting in warehouses, doing nothing. Most of which is simple food or things that they need. They do not allow. And here's the reality on the ground. As Mohad Safa points out, 245 calories. Children in Gaza have only 245 calories a day. Forced starvation is an act of genocide. Let that picture sit with you. That's the reality, guys. That's what they're doing. And of course, they're now currently, as of today, bombing in Rafah while there are British government aid workers there as well. But they don't care. Anybody trying to help them. The obvious reality is here. Now, unfortunately, I do have to break off, guys. Limited time today. But thank you for tuning in. I think it's important that we continue to highlight the lies, despite how uncomfortable it might be for some, because it's so easy to prove that they're lying. And right now, I hope to God that this does not continue the way they're talking about it. I hope it's just actual leverage and that they back down knowing that they don't have position to make this happen. But something tells me the belligerent nature of the people involved in their government that they'll push this farther just to see if they can scare people away from pushing back. And you know who the most hurt in that situation? The Palestinian civilians, mostly children. That's what we're dealing with. That's what your government around the world, most of them, are still blindly supporting and signing documents to try to stop people from investigating. That's not a rules-based anything. That's a belligerent authoritarian government fighting for its partners at the expense of you. Thank you for tuning in today. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.